was that?
With the summoners come.
Now the rest of the team's Phoenix, are your world champions!
Did excel at every single corner.
Inconsistencies we see in Excel.
Expect now on a killing spree.
It was actually clean. We had Legends play from Excel.
We are bold.
FLICKR is there as well. There is the first Nexus turret taken down. Second one. Keeping them delayed. They got desperately on towards the Nexus. He's very low.
Turn this team season around, and here SK's dreams live on.
Nous avons une culture.
Et des traditions.
Take two.
We have our own stadium, not in Bishop. We have the best fans.
And we have the loudest fans.
Right. But we're still the best.
Welcome back to the opening week of the LEC Spring Split. The 2020 season is well underway and new players are taking to the LEC stage with 7 rookies in our first game between Vitality and Mad Lions. Here you see the next EU superstars arriving at the studio. Well, an in-ready check will give you all the big takeaways from yesterday, talk all about the new meta and about these rookies as well as much, much more. I'm Sjokz, joined by Yamatocannon and Vedius, who had some time to rest after an eventful day one. What are the main takeaways? Tell me right now, what was the most exciting thing about day one?
The most exciting thing? Medi-Vedi, of course.
Oh, well, you can't like sell your
You gave me a very limited time frame. All I could think of was Medic, Sjokz. It's the first thing that comes to my mind.
We're just gonna like clip that. All I can think of is Medic. You know what? We'll keep it at that.
But the gameplay was exciting. Honestly, it was a bit slow. I thought that based on our first game, after watching G2 and Mad Lions having a lot of scrappy fights, we'd get some exciting gameplay. But immediately after that, I felt like we had a lot of drawn-out games where teams were struggling to close things out.
Holy moly, it was slow. It was sleepy. There's a lot of problems with the game, but I think we'll talk about that later.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, we will. We're going to tap into that a bit later. But yesterday we did return to the Rift with the LEC. For some teams, it was a very warm welcome, namely so for Origin. You can see them there in the teams that have a record of 1-0. Alphabetically, though, they line up a bit lower. Actually, no, they're just at 5th place. But they had a very clean performance on day one, and they were one of the most hyped rosters coming into this year. You dropped even winners of the offseason altogether, and they delivered versus Fnatic in that match of the week.
For sure, I think my expectation of the 4 top-side players, excluding the support, that I was very certain about. Destiny was the big question mark for me. I think he stepped up big time, knowing that he had to play against arguably one of the best supports here in Europe, on a champion that he loves so much. Of course, Hylissang's Rakan. He played Rakan, delivered big time, played it stone cold.
And I love, Yamato, that you said there were a lot of unexpected variables, because for me, synergy was going to be one of the big questions. You're going up against a Fnatic roster that kept 4 of the 5 members that took Fnatic to 5 games in our final last split. Fnatic took G2 to the finals all 5 games, and I wondered how OG would stack up against them, but it felt like they were already a well-oiled machine. They came in well prepared. We talked a lot about how much we love the drafts, and overall, I'm excited to see what this Origin can do.
Now, when it comes to Origin, we know that they're a team that can prepare very, very well. Giotto has a track record for that as well. It is the question marks arise sometimes as the split goes on or as the seasons goes on, but this is definitely a formidable start. They just have to keep it up.
I love the fact that they locked in Zayarakan, because always we're in this cycle where teams realize late in the season Zayarakan is OP. They locked it in. They were the first. I think this is the first time in history of European League of Legends where a team figures it out before Fnatic, because usually Fnatic are the ones that abuse it, and then we're like, holy shit, we need to actually look it in.
You think it wouldn't be that difficult? They would be strong, but
it's
here
always
we
the
are.
same. From a coach's perspective, always the same. Always the same.
Interesting. Well, for G2, our current reigning champions, they got the job done versus Mad Lions, but I wouldn't say more than that. They got the W, but yeah, it wasn't perfect.
There were highlight moments and there were a lot of moments to criticize for G2 Esports, because I think we saw a lot of the issues that they also had at the World Championship. Their early game looking shaky, people getting caught out of position, Mickey not looking like the performance that he had at a lot of the points throughout last year, and I think that expectations are, of course, very high for this team, even though they have had that role change between Perkz and Caps.
I think the big two question marks for me was like, how is the 2v2 in mid lane going to fare, and how is Caps as an ADC? I think the mid 2v2 was almost non-existent because the early game was rough. Classic G2. Caps on AD carry though, I loved it because, you know, he played the Senna, almost like a caster, so maybe he's still a bit untested, but I liked it.
And you talked a lot with Upset yesterday on PGL as well, where he talked about for Caps, this was kind of a learning experience, just like every other AD carry, because everyone was learning the new champions alongside with him. So we'll see how he fares throughout the rest of the split when maybe nerfs come through for the champions, and what will he do when other AD carries default to their go-to champions, whereas what will Caps default to? Perhaps the Silas in the bot lane?
That's a great point. How do you look at G2? Because we've just gotten a bit in the habit of, especially after summer, saying, oh, well, they'll make it because they are G2. But I kind of feel like we need to look at them through a new, maybe harsher light, in light of what they want to achieve as an end goal.
I completely agree with you, Sjokz, because I think last split, we could have said, oh, it's just G2 ramping up. It's just them at the beginning of the season. They don't take these games super seriously. But it was these levels of early games that cost them their World Championship. So they need to be able to have a cleaner playstyle, and they need to be able to shore up these weaknesses if they want to contest for another MSI title.
On my end, I think it depends on how you want to view the whole season. Because if I'm on G2, they know for sure they're going to the World Championship. That's not the question. They're not in some contention. We can almost put money on it, right? Curse words, for sure. But I think in terms of ramping up, I think last year they had so much to prove in spring. Right now, they have nothing to prove. Everyone's fearing them. Everyone's scared of them. We all know at the end of the day, the right bet to go for is G2.
Well, we'll see. We'll check in a couple of weeks, of course. As for players that impressed us on, they won NU at home because you voted for them for the Kia Player of the Game leaderboard. Here they are. Alfari, I think, is no surprise to anyone. He was absolutely crushing it. And Yamato, some other, well-known names in there.
Well, we mentioned Caps. I think the fact that he didn't get killed a single time, based on what I've heard from scrims and also based on what I saw from the streams, because Mickey and Caps tend to really, really enjoy themselves down in bot lane, test limits, and he played a very stone-cold game on a long-range champion, something that I didn't expect. I expected some bruisers, and I think he surprised us all.
And I think that Patrick was another standout performer from yesterday's games. He was someone that, coming onto XL, departed from Origin, a roster where expectations were pretty high on his shoulders. And now I feel like for him and his support Torre, they want to prove a lot that they can contest for those top spots. And yesterday, with a performance like that, it could be the change that XL needed to be fighting for those playoff spots.
Some strong performances reflected in the Kia Player of the Game leaderboard, Vedius. But who else stood out to you on day one?
Wow, there were some very key players that stood out to me in particular, namely the return of the king in the mid lane, Perkz. Many people questioned whether or not he would be able to stand up against some of the mighty mid lane talent that we have here in Europe, and lo and behold, he did, in particular in these team fights. The calm, calculated play style of the champion of Europe was able to showcase what he could do in the mid lane as he locked down the enemy AD carry, shut them down, and helped G2 find a significant victory. But he's going to be going up against another star mid lane that we have here in Europe in Larson. This man impressed yesterday, and it was something that I think he needed to do after what was a disappointing end of the split last year. Everyone can remember that Corki ultimate, or the Corki W rather, into the fountain. That performance was something that scarred him, and coming back and having these levels of outplays, having this carry performance is exactly what he needs and what his team wants in order to help him stand out. But the man that we have to focus on is the man that put alpha into the name Alphari. His gangplank was sublime, winning 2v1s, impacting the entire map with his ultimate. He showcased what he was capable of with this champion and what you can't afford to do against this Origin roster. They are proving that they are multi-threat, and it is great to see this performer performing at the level that we expect him to coming into this year.
I have to agree with you, man. I think Alphari, the biggest question mark for me was always how well does he do later on in the game? Because he's never been in a position where, like, you know, he had to carry, because mostly I think he had the habit of always grouping.
Yep.
His lane phase was always insane. That's what every top laner said. Wunder told me, Cabo told me, and those are the words of very respected top laners. And now he carried the late game part as well, so I'm excited for what's to come for Alphari.
Where was he in your top 10 list?
He was number
20?
10 for me.
Number 10 in the top 20, I think. I mean, that's fair, seeing the history.
I think, like, I'm getting to a point, though, where I would consider putting him top 5. Of course, there is still a lot of the split to go, and we're only day 1, but Alphari was someone I had a lot of confidence in last year. I rated him as the best performing top laner, even on a struggling Origin, and I have high expectations of him coming into this split.
That is the key, and we have to remember that it's not, in week 9, it doesn't have to be about how you did in week 1. It's how you do week after week. It's how you perform in the longevity of your career and of your split, and we're going to keep an eye on Alphari and the rest there. A lot of changes came in, though, for the players to play with, because the offseason had tons of them. Between dragons, items, jungle, and the Rift itself, there's a lot to cover, but we're going to help you make sense of it. First up, here's Ender to teach you about the 2020 jungle.
Thanks, Sjokz. I wanted to take a look at the jungle changes and see if it actually was ruined. Now, there's 3 main things that happened during the preseason. First of all, jungle camps respawn 30 seconds faster. Second, overall gold and experience is down. And third, catch-up experience is removed. And where this lands for us is that jungle is just strictly weaker in 2020 than it was in 2019. And I went and I looked at some of the stats behind this. If you actually compare day 1 junglers here in the LEC to 2019 Summer's average, they're hitting level 6 45 seconds slower, and they're hitting level 11 3 minutes slower. That is a very big difference. Now, it does come at the benefit that Gromp now gives you more experience and gives you enough to hit level 3 if you include it in your first 3 camps. So I want to take a look at the top 5 junglers from day 1 to see, does this mean we get any real changes? And the simple answer is not really. We still see Qiyana, we still see Gragas, but I think some of the big buffs actually came to our single target clearers, the Elise, the Lee Sin, the Jarvans of the world that can now look for earlier and healthier ganks. But that's just the golden experience part of it. The other half was actually the time it takes for camps to respawn. And if you think about it, 2 minutes is roughly the amount of time it takes to full clear, recall, and get back onto the map. And 2 minutes is also how long it takes for camps to respawn now, which means that effectively, if you look at this play with Trick, he full clears his jungle and runs back out there. He already has camps that he needs to be farming. This means there's no longer that 30-second buffer, that 30-second window where you used to be able to go gank a lane, or go put down some vision, or even perhaps go help your laner push out the wave. So you have to be very efficient with your time now, or you're simply going to be losing out on gold and experience. So stop full clearing your jungle. That is going to be a mistake. And if you watch some of our pro players, you're going to see them actually donating a lot of their camps over to the rest of their team. That means the later on we get into the match, when you know you're ganking bot side or going for a dragon down there, tell your top laner, farm Krugs, farm Raptors, give up the experience, because by the time you make it up there anyways, those camps are going to be respawning. So is the jungle ruined? Yes, but at least on average, junglers still win 50% of their games. Back to you, Sjokz.
Well, I'm just going to relay it after the explanation that I know you guys are obviously already aware of. How ruined is jungle, or how do you see the state of the jungle in 2020, Vedius?
Well, as a mid laner, I'm very happy because I just get to take Ender's Raptors every single game, and because they respawn so quickly, I get all that additional experience. But I think it's a lot more about the solo laners right now, because as you were saying, Yamato, the jungle camps, they're not the same objective that they used to be.
For sure, like in mid-game, always there are objectives. There are the dragons, the rift trails, which you like to talk about. But pro teams always look for the outer towers. And in between those movements, you always take the enemy jungle. And that was so valuable in the past. You denied the enemy jungler, you got ahead in XP, you got gold. You basically took 2 CS for the price of 1. Basically, you take a Gromp away, you get a Gromp. Easy math. I'm not going to do any more math. I think that's dangerous. And with that in mind, when you clear one side, you can only control one side of the map, and the enemy jungle could be like, it's fine, I'll just take the other side, because it just spawns over and over, and it gives you no value at all. And I think this is a big cause why the games are so slow. It's really difficult to snowball.
Do you think it's difficult to snowball, but on the other hand, it also seems, well, you know, I'm just going to take the camps over and over and over, and there's a lot of thinking gone out of it, because you'll be able to take something regardless?
I think it's a situation where right now junglers are doing a cost-benefit analysis of what's more valuable. Do we just focus on clearing the jungle, or do we actually just focus on getting junglers that don't need a huge amount of resources early and actually just do a lot of damage inherently? And that's why we're seeing the Elises, the Gragases, the Lee Sins who can just invest into these early ganks, and then later on they don't offer as much value, and instead you just funnel all these resources into your carries, because the jungler's in a state where I do not feel that past the 15-20 minute mark, junglers can have the same impact that they used to have.
I think also to add to that point, in general, always at the beginning of a split, teams tend to be very, very careful. I think getting early ganks is very difficult. We saw Selfmade having a fantastic start. Flash on mid, flash on top, but then he realized, I am 10 CS behind. I need to farm it out. And then we didn't see a repeat gank. So it's a very difficult contrast to make, because in solo you can just spam gank, in competitive people don't die.
Jumping on that point of teams being careful in the beginning of the split, we did notice, and we also saw it in LPL, that the games are longer, they are slower. And besides the changes in the jungle, what do you think is attributing to this fact?
I think one of the biggest things is that a lot of our snowball mechanics have been weakened. Getting early dragons don't have the same impact that they had before. Turret plating now gives you less gold, so investing in it doesn't give you the same advantage that it used to. Baron is 30 seconds shorter than it used to be, which might not seem like a long time, but it really does influence your ability to stay on those consistent sieges. And we're seeing all these small things kind of add up, along with the overall meta change, where I overall think that we're seeing a lot more tanks and teamfight comps than we used to.
For sure. Just to add to the point about dragons, the old Mountain Drake made it very easy to take Nash.
True.
The old Infernal also made it a lot easier to take Nash, and was double in terms of how much stats you got. In terms of the meta as well, everyone's like, okay, we're going to focus on the dragons, we're going to focus on the objectives, we're going to pick a lot of tanks, because Conqueror got nerfed, and there's a whole discussion about why tanks are played, but this is just the meta. Also, Leon and Nautilus are pretty busted.
Yeah, and I guess for teams, it's also kind of muscle memory, right? Like, of course, we're going to fight for the dragon because that's what we've always done. But now you think they have to take, into consideration, no, it's actually better for us to invest in some other things.
I think we might see an evolution in the meta and how teams are approaching the game, because each individual Drake is so much worse than it used to be. If you manage to get a gold lead, maybe get a tower for every Drake, maybe a Rift Herald, maybe some plating, maybe some CS, maybe that gold is going to be so impactful that by the time the team that has the 3 Drakes want to fight on 4th, maybe the enemy team is just stronger because of the snowball of the gold.
Yeah, interesting. We'll see how that evolves. Also talking about some new AD carries in the bot lane, who we saw yesterday, 1-1 for Senna and 2-2 for Aphelios, respectively. What do we think about the OP level of both champions after what we saw yesterday?
I think they both have their strengths and weaknesses, but they definitely have a lot more strengths relative to many other AD carries that are available right now. We've seen that they are very high on the priority list of different teams, but depending on which team you speak to, will tell you which one is more important. Personally, I'm a big fan of Aphelios. I think he is far too versatile. I think that he can just do too many things. And in the hands of a good AD carry player, I think that he is just extremely difficult to deal with.
For sure. I think difficult to deal with, also difficult to play. I am yet to see that person, that player, to really have a standout performance on Aphelios. So I have my kind of reservations, because I saw some LPL performances, not the greatest. Some performances yesterday as well, not the greatest. I think Senna is a lot easier to execute, because she deals with poke, she's long range, she scales super well. There is no drawback at all with playing Senna, while with Aphelios, you need to fight in specific timings, when you have the right guns drawn, when you have the right guns lined up as well, and then it's like almost like Mega Gnar. That's how I would kind of compare it.
Yeah, a hard champion to perfectly master, which is why I think we'll see stellar performances as we continue. Maybe not immediately on day one, but maybe today, as we have 5 more games in the LEC Spring Split, as the teams look to get a flying start to the season. Origin, they had a great first game, and they have a chance to go 2-0. Upset is going to face off against his former team and against Forgiven. And remember, you can watch all the games at twitch.tv/LEC or on YouTube if that's where you're watching watching. Our highlight matchup of the day, however, is Rogue versus XL Esports. Two teams that showed signs of greatness in their first season. You might think, hey, Rogue and XL, you know, one was in playoffs, the other hang around the bottom of the table. But it is just that promise and that growth and the changes they made coming into this year that are exciting to us.
Yeah, it certainly is. I think that when we look at the organizations in their entirety, XL struggled a lot last year. Rogue gradually got better throughout the year. And coming into this year, they needed to make changes. Both of them made changes specifically in the bot lane. And what I love about this bot lane setup is how both are trying very hard to prove something to everyone. We already talked about how Patrick, as a player, formerly of Origin, was considered to be one of the strongest AD carries that we had in the league last year. Expectations were that he would be rivaling some of the historic AD carries that we've had. And meanwhile, for Hansama, he had a rough year overall. And he wants to prove what he can do. Yesterday, I think they both had standout performances. Hansama in the laning phase, Patrick in his late game team fighting, and I think we're getting to see that these two players still have a lot left to prove.
I think for sure the underlying difference between the history of both of these players is always I felt like they were in a position to follow. I think when Hansama performed the best was on this young Misfits roster with Alfari, with Ignar, and all of these players that you kind of haven't heard before, and they had the breakout performance. Then it was the big Misfits with the superstars. Same with Patrick, big team with a lot of big names. Now they can become leaders and they become the player that can be the superstar on their own team.
Yeah, when you look at the addition that they each brought to the roster, like namely Rogue, of course, the rookies who now have a year under their belt and are now teamed up with an AD carry that has a certain caliber and also a certain history. I'm excited to see where it goes, and I think they have to start thinking about playoffs. Rogue can do it, that we know, but can they do it in this configuration? And where do you see XL going?
Well, I think that for Rogue, expectations are top 4 right now. Not just from fans, but by many analysts. Remind me, where did you put Rogue in your power rankings?
Top 4, yeah.
Yeah, top 4. So you can see that like expectations are very high for this roster. I think one of the players that really stood out was Larson in the mid lane. I think that his evolution throughout his career, where last year we looked at him as a player that expectations were high. We thought that he would be good, but I think that he was a little inconsistent. He's very reliable laner, wasn't quite the clutch playmaker that we wanted him to be, but we're already seeing some of this clutch playmaking very early on into the split. And I hope we get to continue to see that because we know he has a wide portfolio of champions and we know that he's very capable of doing a lot of things. So this is only promising for Rogue moving forward.
For sure. I think Larson, diversity, I think the way he plays the map is key. But I think something that never gets highlighted, we always talk about the players, is the coaching staff behind. I need to throw a bone to my people as well, you know?
Yeah.
I think when there's growth and there's a lot of rookies and steady improvement, you have to give credit to the coaching staff as well. Freddy122, I remember playing against him in Season 3. And now he's coaching, he's doing well.
He is doing well, and Juke on the other side, sorry, for Vitality, because that's the next game, and I was running a bit forward, but our next game and our first game of the day is Vitality and Juke, of course, the coach that led Splice to the World's quarterfinal this year, and he's standing by to check in with Laure at the Beko Smoothie Bar.
Thank you very much, Sjokz. We are here at the Beko Smoothie Bar, and I am with Duke. Thank you for joining me ahead of your game. I want to talk about a few stuff. First, you had an amazing run last year. I don't think many people expected that you would go so far, especially against SKT, and you're back. You have a new staff, you have a new team. And when you think about it, you took some pieces from every team who was at Worlds. Manager from G2, assistant coach from Fnatic, you were at Splice. So tell me about this new coaching staff you have in the new team.
Yeah, we wanted to bring the best out of the 3 teams that went to Worlds to kind of share the experience that we had and all the knowledge that the 3 staff had. And I already knew Mephisto, and Mitch from G2 is pretty experienced in the scene. So yeah, it's really great to have them on board, and we are hoping to build really a solid foundation for the future of Vitality.
And a lot of experience to share, I guess. Now, a bit more about the team. You had an interesting challenge last year. As I said, you went very far, defied many people's expectations. What about this year? What is the challenge, and how far can you bring this team?
I think we are starting from further than last year. I think we are really rebuilding the whole project, as we thought that the Vitality project in his current form was not really going anywhere. So we started with 3 rookies, and we are not going to, after the first game, I think it's pretty obvious to everyone that we are starting from a very low point. So for now, I think we just focus on building the fundamentals, building team cohesion, and first trying to play the game, because at the moment we are not, and I hope we will this afternoon. And starting from this, anything can happen. But I would say that playoff would be a really good split already.
But I guess the two veterans in the team can help in a way, no?
Yeah, for sure. They bring some experience. I think they were, however, used to a really specific way to play the game in the previous years, and I think they also have to learn a lot on how to play, I would say, a bit more standard. But they bring a lot of experience and calm to the other young players, and they're also really easy to work with. So in terms of how the team behave and practice, I think it's really good. But now we need to follow up by improving.
And let's see how it transforms today. Now a bit more about this season. You said you had rookies, you had veterans, but I mean, all the teams play for the same length in a way. And I recall you telling me last year that you may have ended up burnt out. That's the risk when you have a season so long. So how do you avoid this from happening? How do you make sure that the mental state of the players stay focused in a way?
And I think not necessarily us, but if you look at all the teams that were at the gauntlet last year, it was more which team was the least burnt out at the end. And indeed, the seasons are really long, and that's why you need to implement a lot of things outside of the game, sports, gym, nutrition, take time to rest too with the team. At the moment, everything has to be kind of implemented at Vitality, and I think with Splice last year and now Mad Lions, we had a really good infrastructure on that topic, and I think I will try to, one step at a time, bring all of those things to Vitality. It's more everything that is around the players and around the team that is important.
All right, well, thank you for these insights. Good luck for the game today. Now back to you, Sjokz, at the desk.
Thank you very much indeed, Duke. Yeah, he makes a fantastic point, because we can only really focus on what we see on the Rift, but a lot of that is driven by the teams behind the teams.
Yeah, for sure. I think I remember when we saw the regional qualifier, not yesterday, when Gilius made the comments about all the Spices food. That's a big deal. They had this buff guy walking around with a platter of muffins. That was good stuff.
Yeah, it's good. You have to be surrounded well if you're going to play a long season like this. Great insight from Duke, as always. And today, Vitality and Duke go up against the Mad Lions, another organization that is going all in on young talent. And in fact, 7 out of the 10 players in this matchup are rookies, all of them looking to take their career to new heights. However, on day one, they started off with a loss. So we kind of wanted to look at how they did it on day one and what can be changed according to the draft in Yamatocannon's draft judgment.
I need a gavel.
Yes, you do. But we're
Where's my gavel?
It's coming. You've only been here one day, dude. So Vitality's draft. Vitality played SK, and you said from the get-go, I don't like this draft. What did they do wrong, and what would you like them to change?
So I think this is a draft that may be a team of level of G2 that G2 could execute. It's disappearing because it deserves to disappear. Yeah. On the left-hand side, we have picks that are very simple to execute. Good long range, play on poke, good engage, and good scaling. Always when you have the weaker level teams, this is what is going to be victorious. And we can look at specific players as well. We have the comp on Misfortune. We didn't see him at all because he's playing Misfortune against Braum and Ornn. It's just impossible. I think Vitality needs to simplify, take a page out of SK's book, and just keep going with the Ornn and the Braum and just have a straight way to victory.
Is the TLDR for week 1 of newly configured teams just make it as easy as possible?
For sure.
In general?
Just have a strong side that you play for, a weak side that scales good into the game. We saw OG as well. Very simple. Zyra Khan, Gragas. And then we saw in the top side a GP.
Anything to add on?
I would only say that to me, the way in which Vitality's draft went, it looked like a lot of comfort. The fact that they picked the Misfortune with the Braum and the Ornn open, to me, suggests that either they put a high value on these champions when perhaps they shouldn't, or they just want to make sure that their new players want to play something that they're comfortable on. And while I do agree that the comp was difficult to execute, and we saw that multiple times, the way in which they set up a lot of those fights, I think was promising. So I'm excited to see what they can do today.
With a few changes, we might see a much better performance out of them today. Let's take a look at the side of Mad Lions and their draft versus G2 Esports. And to remind people who may have missed it, Mad Lions actually put up a fantastic fight in the early game versus G2. It was in the mid game that they fumbled.
And honestly, I think that's mostly because of their draft. They had a very simple to execute draft. I think later on, Humanoid struggled to play the Mordekaiser on side because G2 can be very shifty with how they play on the map, use Fog of War. And then the team fights that G2 executed were very difficult. They had to bait out spells. They had to hope for some kind of ways in. It was super, super difficult. That's why I'm saying G2 could maybe execute the composition from Vitality from yesterday. But now in the early stages, this is the comp that you want to bet on.
Braum on is the TLDR.
Yes.
Lock in those champs because they're straightforward, they're easy, and it's difficult to mess it up.
All right, we'll see if the teams take our advice and if they bring changes into day 2. It is time for more action in the LEC. As we kick off day 2 of the Spring Split, let's hit the Rift.